Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell, and I'm the Executive Director here at Ikahi Mediation Center. Ikahi Mediation Center is a nonprofit community mediation center. We were founded in 1983 as a part of the Island of Hawaii YMCA, and in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit organization, which makes 15 years this year. And our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to come up with their own best solutions. And to achieve that mission, we offer mediation, facilitations, and training like this talk to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. We hold this brown bag series every third Thursday at 12 noon at Zoom. It is free, and you do need to register each time to get the Zoom link. At the end of our talk, we are going to ask you to fill out a short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. And so I'll put the link into the chat, and please take a moment to click into that and give us your thoughts before you go today. I'll also send it out as an email later with the slides and a video link. And if you're not sure that we have your email address, like if you got the Zoom link from a friend, just privately send me your name and email address in the chat, and we can make sure that you're included next time. And if you like our talk, please feel free to register for more in the future. Our next speaker on August 19th is Elizabeth Kent on the topic Signature Moves, What Works for You in Resolving Conflicts. And I'm going to put that in the chat link right here, right now. So here's the link to register. Okay. And I can put that in again later. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker. And I hope I say your name correctly, Aliza McKeigue.
Got it.
Yay. Aliza is the founder and facilitator of Root and Rise Therapeutical Horticulture, whose mission is to cultivate social, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness through creativity and interaction with nature. She holds a BA in psychology and a certificate in horticultural therapy from AHTA accredited Chicago Botanic Garden. Aliza has a decade of experience in adult mental health, child and family services, and the Hawaii public school system. Please join me in welcoming with your silent applause. Take it away, Aliza.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and it's wonderful to see you all here. I'm going to share my screen and get my slideshow going. So hopefully this looks, can you all see? Thumbs up if you, okay, awesome. And let's see. I'm new to doing this also, so bear with me. Okay. So yes, here I am. Today we'll be talking about nature, and I call it the Great Equalizer. And yeah, as Julie, I don't really need to go over and introduce myself, but this is definitely a topic that's dear to my heart, how nature is an integral part of our lives and our well-being. And we'll go into the details, of course, but I think it's important to address how nature can be a critical factor in personal growth and the health of interpersonal relationships and community for a number of reasons. Nature should theoretically be something that's accessible to all of us, and it serves a greater purpose. So once we can recognize the value of nature in our own lives, we can then, as humanity, treat nature and the earth with dignity and respect through sustainable practices and trying to reverse climate change and honoring the land that we're on. And the more that we have this relationship with nature, the longer nature will be with us to give us this opportunity for healing and wellness and growth. So Did that click forward to the next slide or no? Okay, getting it down. Here, okay. So just an overview of what we'll be talking about. We'll go over a couple theories behind our affinity toward nature as humans. We'll talk about how our attraction to and evolution with nature can contribute to better communication, healthier relationships, and vibrant communities. And at the end, we'll kind of talk about practical ways to infuse nature into your personal lives and your relationships to really get the best out of it. So just to start and kind of align all of us, and I'll ask you to take a minute to imagine a time or a place when you felt really centered and connected to nature. And so maybe, yeah, just think about all the sensory parts, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the feelings. We'll just take like 20 seconds. And yeah, what about this scenery and the experience made it significant? If maybe 2 of you or 3 of you would be willing to share really briefly what, you can unmute yourself and share what that experience was like, I'd love to hear. Who's feeling brave?
Well, I think just being in nature, there's the smells and the feeling apart from the built environment. So you're responding to, something very different from your work and everyday life.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share a specific time when you may have felt really connected to nature? Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, I envisioned this huge cottonwood tree in the yard when I was a kid. And it was right outside my bedroom window. But yet it just seemed so huge in this huge canopy, and the trunk was so strong and the bark so textured. And I used to love to be out underneath that tree, but also it helped to ground me even when I was in my room and I could look out and see it.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to share? Meg?
Smells really evoke for me a lot of memory. And not too long ago, I was walking in the woods with your mother, as it happens, and her dog. And it had been after a lot of rain, and the pine was so intense that I was breathing hard from climbing the hills on our hike. And I just was infused with this pine. And it brings me back to my childhood, because I actually grew up in a pine woods. So it evokes that sense of security and home and all of those things for me. And that's so important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I like what you said about a feeling of home. I was doing a session with somebody a couple weeks ago, and we're in the forest, and she said, I just feel home. I don't know how to describe it, but I just feel home. And I felt the same way too. And to hear it again, it's just highlighting the common thread that we all have. And for those of you who didn't share, I'm sure there's been a time that you could think of that you felt really connected to your place, your presence, whatever it might be. But yeah, so this relationship with nature is not something that's new. It's always been a part of our lives throughout time and history. So here's just a couple examples of how humans have interacted with nature. So here on the left is the temple at Epidaurus in Greece. And so this was a restorative center for the Greeks during the classical times. It was, whoops, okay, hang on. Did the slide switch or no? So it was a restorative center that was built to the landscape. So using the natural features that were at that place, they kind of built the structures around that and tried to highlight different natural pathways. And there's these buildings that are open air, and people who were sick would make a pilgrimage for therapies and baths and exercise. And in that sense, the place was seen as sacred and, you know, just a really important piece to health and wellness. Another example is Persian gardens in Iran. So historically, there were cool, shady oases in deserts that people used for relaxation and obviously just cooling off and being inspired, and some spirituality connected to that also. And I bring this into the presentation because they were both in public spaces and in private spaces. So obviously this was super integral to the culture and the well-being. And some of the gardens were really grand and elaborate. Others were small and modest and just a place to sit and rest. And then in the 19th century, there was this big uptick of using gardens and nature in healthcare facilities in America and in Britain, particularly. So this picture on the right, this is actually a cancer hospital in Connecticut, obviously a modern one, but you can kind of see the like meandering paths and places to sit. And yeah, it's obviously not like a production farm or anything, but it does bring this sense of nature to an indoor facility. So, and then also just a reference I'm from Massachusetts, and so there was what is now the Worcester State Hospital. There had a psychiatric facility, and they had developed farmland there that was tended to by the patients for therapeutic purposes. So even back then, there was recognition of the real impact nature and outdoors could have on health and wellness. Here's some more photos on the left. This is the Saihoji temple in Kyoto, Japan. It's a Buddhist temple that was built in the 700s, and it was restored in 1339. And that was in response to chaotic conditions at the time in the culture and society. So you can kind of just see the different features. There's the water, there's the pathways, the foliage on the trees, different colors. So it was meant for a slow pace and reflection and to accent the natural features. And then in all indigenous cultures on every continent, there's a tie to the land. Every continent has people with earth-based traditions, values, and just the tie of nature to survival. So this picture in the middle, this is obviously a modern picture, but it's people in Ethiopia harvesting teff. And teff is one of the earliest domesticated plants and is a staple crop of the Ethiopian diet, still is. And I chose this picture because of the fact that it's showing that this very early domesticated plant is still being utilized. And I just like that the two are handing it off to each other, and it shows that social bond that nature and plants and earth can bring. And then here on the right is a Hawaiian person in ceremony. It looks like he's making an offering. Something is wrapped in tea leaf, natural material. And yeah, for a lot of us who are here in Hawaii, we know that many gods and goddesses and the language and the stories are related to natural phenomenon, and the culture is just so tied to, you know, the rains and the winds and the different aspects of Earth. So, yeah, we'll kind of just hop into, or I guess just this is exemplifying the connection that humans have with Earth. It's for sustenance, for culture, physical and emotional health, and just connection to others. So why is this? Why did this relationship between human and nature exist, and why does it persist? So I'm going to outline 3 different theories that there's some sub streams of these theories, but these are kind of the major ones. So the first is the biophilia hypothesis. This term was coined by Edward Osborne Wilson in 1984. And I bring the dates into these theories because it just shows how, this is a Western and a scientific opinion about why we are attracted to nature, but we all know that people have been doing this and knowing this for centuries and forever, really. So I just want to point that out. But yeah, the theory is that we have this desire to commune with nature because nature's key to survival. It's very much so rooted in our evolutionary past, and we have this inner biological drive to survive, and that's why we love nature. Just to break down the word a little bit, biophilia, bio meaning living, life, and philia meaning like the attraction to, fondness of, philia versus phobia, that sort of thing. So just, I guess in a more practical sense, what does this mean? So some examples is our appreciation for flowers. Maybe not everybody loves bouquets and flowers, but bouquets and flowers are definitely used as a welcoming and as a I'm sorry and as I hope you feel better. And we are interested in flowers for sure. The floral business, for example. But this is because of our biophilia. It's because flowers, when they are making bloom, it is the precursor to fruit being given and being, a flower will give, a plant will flower and then give fruit. And so for early humans, seeing a flower is a signal that food is coming soon. It is a signal of nutrition and sustenance. So that's why we love flowers, is what this theory is saying. Another example would be our fondness for baby animals, finding them cute. This is because way back, it had served us to protect and befriend certain species because we would eat them or we would use their coats or they would protect us. So it was in our best interest to keep baby animals alive, and that's why we think they're cute. Similarly, we have a lot of people have an aversion to spiders and snakes, and also just the feeling of being on a high cliff and looking down and you kind of maybe take a step back. That natural instinct, that's for self-preservation. And so we do that because it's in our genetics to want to survive. And having evolved with nature, that the people who did kind of abide by those instincts were the ones who survived and passed those genes on. So yeah, I guess some people argue that working with and like our affinity toward nature is also something that is learned. So watch a parent in their garden and a child watching them and picking up and learning how to garden, that's a learned skill. So, and another argument is that if biophilia is true, why have we developed other non-survival related interests or interests that don't serve us? So the idea, if it's all about survival, why do we have these other interests in our lives? So that's the first theory. The second one is the attention restoration theory. So again, this is why the human and nature relationship exists and continues on. This theory was developed by environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan in 1989. So again, quite recent. And it highlights the power of natural settings to help people recover from mental fatigue. So yeah, as the slide reads, contact with natural settings causes involuntary attention, which has restorative properties, in contrast to tiresome and prolonged use of directed attention. So just to kind of define what that means, voluntary and directed attention is it's what we're doing here right now. It's focused attention. It's the attention, the concentration that's needed to carry out a plan and to filter out distractions. It's directed attention is something that is in our modern day and age is something that's valued, and it's very much a part of our work and our lives for a lot of us. But the thing about directed attention is that first, focused attention actually conflicts with the evolutionary mechanism in our brain. So the reptilian brain, sort of like the archaic part of us, and our limbic system prefer to monitor the entire surrounding instead of having a really concentrated focus, so that we're not missing potential sources of danger. And maybe we're seeing potential sources of food and things like that. So being in a state of directed attention for a prolonged period of time causes fatigue, impulsivity, anger, poor productivity. We become less efficient. I think we can all sort of speak to or like understand this this feeling if we're maybe sitting at our computer too long, or after an 8 hours of work, you need a break, or throughout your workday, you feel like you need a break. And that might have to do with this. So on the other hand, there's the involuntary attention. And we refer to it as soft or quiet fascination. So that means that sort of fascination is effortless focus. It elicits a sense of wonder and exploration. It's sort of like unconscious interest and concentration. So think about maybe a time in nature, like we were reflecting, where you were kind of just in awe and you're looking around and you're present and you're focused, but it's not like you're intentionally having to make this effort to stay focused. It's really just there. So yeah, sometimes impressive landscapes can make us feel that way, or just like impressive processes of nature. So witnessing a chameleon change colors, or a rainstorm that just leaves you in awe. So that's that involuntary attention. And philosopher, psychologist, historian William James said, strange things, moving things, wild animals, bright things, pretty things. These were things that elicited this involuntary attention. So yeah, and at the bottom here, it says nature is the most common and reliable source of this restoration from mental fatigue. And that's not to say that there's not other experiences that can give us this restoration, things like art and music and movement, or whatever it is for you. Those can definitely restore our attention, but nature is the most common and reliable source of that, and hopefully the most available, because it should, and this is all hypothetical, it should be accessible. We should all be able to get into nature when we need to, and it's free, hopefully. So that's that. But yeah, there's a study of people. So they took 3 different groups: people who were going to hike in the forest, walk in the city, or stay at home. And the attention of these people were tested by proofreading. They had a document to proofread before and after the activities of hiking in a forest, walking city, or staying home. And only the people in the forest made drastic improvements in their concentration after doing those activities. So they were able to concentrate longer, they found more errors. It's just, yeah, the science says it if you don't believe the intuition. There's also a lot of advocates for like using nature as medicine for children who have ADHD, and kind of, I read in a book, it was like, nature's Ritalin is nature, something like that. So yeah, there's definitely support for this theory. Let's see. Okay, the stress reduction theory number 3. It's kind of similar to the attention restoration, but this is stating that nature promotes recovery from stress, which is distinct from attention fatigue. So it's also called the psychoevolutionary theory, and it was coined by Ulrich, who's done a lot of studies on nature's impacts and human activity in 1991. So again, recent. It's important to understand what stress is, what we're talking about. So stress is a set of physiological responses to any situation which is threatening to the well-being. So knowing that, there were lower levels of stress indicators for people when they're exposed to nature. So stress indicators being the experience of negative emotions, so fear, sadness, anger. Some of the physiological stress indicators are increased blood pressure and heart rate, sweaty palms, muscle tension, and then increased autonomic arousal. And yeah, I'm not sure who, but natural settings are less perceptually jumbled than urban settings. They don't require a lot of information to be processed, and therefore stress is reduced, as opposed to an urban setting, which requires a lot of processing. So that can be stressful for us. And lastly, there's certain places in nature, certain natural settings that are particularly more, that are more connected with like our survival. And so they more so create feelings of pleasure, calm, and safety than others. While all natural settings will do that, there's certain places. So some of these places that really promoted survival are places where there's water. So still water is particularly, has this effect because it's safe feeling. A natural setting where you're at a vantage point that you can see what's going around or what's going on so that you're safe from predators. That is a particularly good place to relieve stress. Any place that's any place where there's vegetation and there's seeming to be an abundance of potential food sources can be particularly restorative for our stress levels. And yeah, anywhere where we have a place to hide and a place where we can see but not be seen. So I just think it's interesting to think about, like, yes, nature as a whole can bring us this stress reduction factor, but not all nature is created equal in that regard. So when I'm designing therapeutic gardens, I'm taking into account that somebody can see but not be seen. And maybe there's this feeling of like abundance and bountiful vegetation, because biologically that makes us feel like, oh, we're going to be fed, we're safe, we're going to survive. Yeah, and so it would be, I guess, it would be maladaptive for us to be highly stressed in unthreatening circumstances. So yeah, it just kind of explains a little more about this theory. So knowing all that, we're gonna kind of combine the theories and bring it back to like finding solutions, growing peace, and what is it about, or like how can nature impact our interpersonal relationships? So I've broken it down into these two pieces. There's this shared experience. So the fact that we, at the beginning of this presentation, we're all thinking about places in which we felt calm or soothed or at peace in nature. And it's likely that most of us could come up with something. Humans universally share this affinity toward nature due to our evolution with nature. And so just knowing that alone can bring us together, and we'll kind of talk about that after. And secondly, realizing that we are, as individuals, are a part of a whole. So if we're healthy within ourselves, our relationships will be healthier. And so using nature to help us calm and decompress and regulate emotions will help our relationships benefit. So yeah, the shared experience part. despite all of our differences and uniqueness, so our different attitudes, beliefs, values, race, culture, age, gender, interests, skills, ways of communication, all of our differences, biophilia and our connection to the earth is our common ground. It is something that we can all come back to and relate to. And in circumstances where we feel so distant from people and we feel misunderstood and we feel anger, recognizing this simple fact that we're also human and all have commonalities can bring us, it can make us be more accepting and understanding and more empathetic. And once we can sort of cultivate those feelings and those, and bring that into our discussions will be more civil. Our conflicts will be managed more effectively, and we'll be able to negotiate better. So yeah, it's really just recognizing this can break down barriers. And this second bullet saying that a shared activity or a common experience lowers defenses and opens up lines for communication. So what I mean by that with these pictures, so there's this photo on the left, there's a older guy and a younger child, and I was just imagining in my head, maybe if this kid was a little older, he had an iPad or something, and grandpa was not interested in like learning about the iPad. Grandpa wanted to teach the son how to garden, or the child how to garden, but the kid wasn't really, or maybe not garden, but like do some household tasks or fix a car or something. The child was not really into it. The fact that they're here in nature together, walking, is their shared activity, and maybe they can have a really authentic conversation, and they're sharing this activity. Defenses are lowered when we're not face to face, just only focusing on like verbal and maybe there's the bodily like communication as well. But when we're kind of doing something together, the pressure is taken off of the confrontation. So yeah, walking outdoors, hiking, sitting at a park, planting seeds, weeding, all of these things we can do together and make space for a conversation, really. And this picture on the right, this is in the Philippines, and the woman in the front on the right, she's a Aita, so an indigenous Filipino, and the person on the left, I think, is somebody maybe from Manila or like the city. And just the fact that maybe they speak different dialects, but they can come together, kneel down, touch the soil, and do this thing that's so ingrained in our biology. They can do that together. And yeah, I reflect sometimes how the American culture, we favor individualism and personal pursuits and getting ahead. And while that maybe has its perks, it also can leave people feeling really divided and alone and separate. So taking nature, a process that works so collectively and that we too are a part of, that can remind us of our similarities and our connection and our common ground. So maybe we're not so alone, it can kind of bring us out of that feeling. And I think in a lot of interpersonal relationships, sometimes we're angry or we're fearful because we feel so divided and alone, but realizing that we're not can be powerful. And nature can help us realize that. So yeah, the picture on the right is obviously an inner city, and they've done an awesome job at making rooftop gardens and cultivating green space. There's a study or numerous studies, but one in particular that I'm thinking about, inner city apartment complexes installed green spaces that were actually well used by the residents. And studies showed that the residents felt stronger ties to the community. They had a greater perceived sense of safety, so they reported feeling safer. And then there was actually also lower levels of crime there. So it alludes to the fact that maybe green space deters crime. Maybe it makes us feel tied to community and each other. So yeah, I say maybe, but I'm I absolutely agree with that. And then same thing with community gardens, I think, and this also links to the bottom bullet here, COVID-19. I put that in because if there's a silver lining of COVID-19, the pandemic, I think it raised awareness of the opportunity to be outside because it forced people outside to get together. And then, you know, hopefully that lives on and people continue to gather outdoors. But there was also this increase in home gardening and community gardening. I just saw a lot of that where we are here, and then also just like social media, people getting into gardening more, and just that shared experience, I think, was something and is something that has helped us lift up out of this. And then, yeah, the victory gardens during World War II, the garden allotments in public spaces to support the troops by producing food. It also met this social emotional need by bringing people together during that time. So yeah, and the picture below, it's people sitting around a fire. If you've ever sat around a fire, you probably know that there's this, I mean, it's warm, but there's this warmth amongst the people, and this ability to kind of open up. You're focusing on this fire and bring people together, that shared space. So, yeah, and so the second piece of how how we can bring nature into our lives and our interpersonal relationships is by keeping ourselves healthy. So recognizing that we're a part of a whole and that each of us plays a role and has a responsibility as individuals to be healthy and to nurture our healthy communities, you know, finding ways to make that happen. And so we can all probably agree that like pain and stress has negative effects on our emotions. Maybe we become irritable and reactive, irrational. And then there's there's science behind that, and there's lots of science behind the idea of chronic stress related to a lot of diseases. And so stress weakens the immune system, causes inflammation, causes fatigue, gastrointestinal issues, headaches, backaches. Like, you know, you can probably imagine when you felt stressed and the physical impact. And so when we're stressed and when our bodies are in pain and when we feel compromised, we're not operating to our fullest potential. We're not in our best selves. And so realizing that a lot of interpersonal difficulties might come, we often point fingers and say it's like the other person or this person's doing this, but to kind of own the fact that we, if we are feeling well in ourselves, we can feel better about each other. And truly, we can only change ourselves too. So to kind of take it on as a responsibility to take care of our minds and our bodies can help prevent that internal distress and trauma and pain and disease that might make us react in a not so healthy way. So yeah, exposure to nature decreases physiological stress. I think we mentioned this before, such as lowering blood pressure, reducing muscle tension. It increases positive feelings and reduces fear and anger. And I think, yeah, that's an important piece. Like we come into conversations and discussions and relationships sometimes with imagined fear or it's real, but coming from an internal place, some fear and anger, and that can feed the interaction. So anything we can do to kind of reduce and downplay the fear and anger can be helpful. And then, yeah, nature improves the immune response and reduces pain. So, whoops. Shinrin-yoku is a Japanese tradition it's an ancient tradition, but in 1982, the National Forest Authorities in Japan suggested advertising Shinrin-yoku to the public, and now it is officially recognized as a method of preventing disease as well as a supplement to treatment. And so the English, translation is forest bathing, but essentially it means taking in the forest atmosphere. So kind of just being in nature. And so below I have passive active engagement. It's not good for you, or the reason that it's good for you is being in the forest is not necessarily because you're walking and getting exercise. Studies show that just passively being in nature has the same positive effects as doing in nature. So yeah, it's just when I first learned about Shinrin Yoku, I was pretty blown away because, you know, I go into the forest and I come out and I feel better, you know, and so to see that it's a real, they're studying it in universities, forest medicine is what they're calling it, and it's implemented in hospitals and it's prescribed, you know, that's just, it's pretty powerful that that's happening. And yeah, so so I'm not a scientist by any means, but I'm going to explain this to my best and shortest ability. Terpenes are bioactive substances released into the air by trees and plants. And so in a forest, which is lush with trees and plants, there's lots of terpenes, and terpenes strengthen the immune system and lower stress hormones. In the forest, there's anti-cancer terpenes and natural killer cells in our bodies that are stimulated by these. The natural killer cells are they're a special form of white blood cells that help to remove viruses, prevent cancer, and fight against existing tumors. So I'll give a list of references at the end because there's some great books that like elaborate on this. But just a little statistic, they found that a single day in wilderness increases natural killer cells by 40%, and 2 days in nature increases the killer cells more than 50%. And the natural killer cells remained elevated in our system for 30 days. So yeah, I think it's just the fact that like there's a spiritual component, there's a mental component, of why trees and the forest and plants are good for us, but there's actually like physiological things happening and an exchange between the plants and humans. So pretty impressive to me. And yeah, going back to the passive and active engagement, this shows that nature should be accessible to everybody. You don't have to go for a hike to gain the benefits. You can just sit underneath a tree in the forest to have the benefits, you know? So it should be accessible to you no matter your ability. So, okay, how can I use nature to strengthen my relationships? Using nature as a teacher. So this is kind of summing up what we've talked about and some new points too, but using nature's metaphors is what I call it. Being in nature and recognizing these processes and then applying the same lessons to our lives can improve ourselves and our relationships. So these are just a couple lessons from nature that I came up with. So there's the listening and observing piece. So it's really easy, or not really easy, but it's easier to be quiet and still in nature than it might be to be quiet and still in your apartment or in your house or wherever it might be. There's something about nature that it's easy to dip into that space. We can get we can use nature as a space to get comfortable with quiet and just perceiving instead of doing and saying and interrupting. It's just about being, you know, instead of doing. And the more we can practice listening and observing, the more effective our communication will be, because listening and just being present are key in effective communication. If you're the type of person who likes to jump in and talk all the time, it's not as effective. Sometimes we just need to receive and listen. Secondly is interdependence and diversity. So yeah, if you look at a forest, no one tree is alike. There's so many different components at play. So observing nature can remind us a need for collective processes in order to function best. So when you see a really healthy forest, that's kind of that reminder, like all of these different things are piecing together and this is a healthy forest. So if we can see the fuller picture and have a broad perspective, we have a better, in our relationships and conversations, we can see a better range of solutions. So just taking the forest as an example, I obviously love the forest. It's an intricate web of life. There's so many different organisms with different unique roles. There's root networks communicating with fungi and microorganisms. Those are work to feed and stabilize and grow the trees. There's the leaves way up in the canopy capturing the sunlight and using photosynthesis to stay alive and thrive. And then there's the birds and the insects and the wind helping to pollinate and disseminate seeds. And then there's decaying debris that gives nutrients. So many different components, kind of like a community. Yeah, and so that's sort of the metaphor there. And also remembering that there's more than just one factor at play. There's all these, we have ourselves and there's others, and then there's external and pre-existing factors as well. Acceptance and non-judgment. So unlike stepping into a party or a grocery store or a conversation with a friend, stepping into nature offers a space of non-judgment. Realizing the diversity in nature can remind us that, but also just being in a space where we feel accepted and free of judgment can help us cultivate that same skill and practice acceptance more. And so, yeah, you know, nature's main goal is survival. It's when you think of a flower or a bird, they're probably not getting caught up in their past experience or their future. They're really just operating in the present. And there's, not to say there's no memory or learned behaviors, but there's not that complex cognitive emotional aspect that is motivating. So yeah, as much as we like to say we're non-judgmental, we're humans and we come with our whole set of values, beliefs, backgrounds, perceptions. And so, you know, the more we can experience nature's acceptance, the more we can practice it. And when we practice acceptance, we'll have more genuine conversations. We'll feel more free to speak our truth when we feel accepted. We can cultivate compassion, and we can let go of attachment to whatever it is, certain results, anything. And with that, we're opening up more possibilities in our relationships. Yeah, these last couple metaphors, there's patience. So any of you who are a gardener or who actively are involved with plants, there's a major lesson of patience. You plant seeds and you wait for the fruit to come, that sort of thing. So by recognizing this and practicing it, we can maybe realize that patience is crucial in effective communication too. If we recognize slow but constant progression of nature, we can maybe realize that change takes time. So it takes time for people to change, for us to change. We can be more compassionate. Yeah, and you know, there's a specific example of seeds that will wait in the ground for decades, even centuries, to germinate and to sprout. And they'll just wait for that optimal time when maybe their neighboring tree falls over and now they have sunlight. So yeah, just trying to align with where the optimal time to grow and to make moves is. And let's see, resilience and adaptability. So nature's main goal is to thrive and survive, and it will do so. It will try to survive no matter what. Yeah, I mean, I have a picture on the next slide that kind of illustrates, but weeds growing on lava rock, or the adaptive, you know, a gecko will lose its tail to run from a predator and it'll regrow it. Even like human loss of sight will strengthen other senses. But we, nature and humans, are self-preserving, and we want to thrive and survive. So kind of remembering the personal and community resilience can help us overcome challenges. You know, when we realized how resilient we were in the past, we can move forward that inside of us, you know. And this last part I just wrote, this doesn't mean that nature doesn't, it's all hunky-dory and peace and love. Like, there's obviously destructive moments and competitive processes in nature, but the takeaway is that nature is always working to strike a balance and survive. And so, you know, even in those destructive moments, there's this glimmer of hope, and remind us of how to be strong and get through. So again, this is just showing the resilience and adaptability. This picture on the left is a nae, and it's a little plant that comes straight out of the lava. It's a native plant. I just love to see it. And this one on the right is a windblown tree. This is not Hawaii. I don't know where it is, but showing that like a tree is gonna try to do its best to thrive and survive no matter what the external factors are. So we have like 5 minutes, just taking what we know and what we just learned and applying it to our lives. So pointing out, recognizing these metaphors I kind of just went over, and finding these examples when you are in nature, sharing with other people, making it real, making it something that you can connect on. You know, if you share the knowledge that this seed takes years to germinate, then, and how that relates to patience and resilience, then having that conversation can strengthen our shared biophilia and hopefully our relationships. Advocacy, so advocating for green space installation, utilization, and preservation wherever you are. We need to continue to raise awareness so that we have that human right of access to nature for ourselves and for generations to come. Obviously, spending time in nature for the attention restoration and stress reduction. So using nature like medicine, really. And using natural settings, materials, and activities for communication, conflict resolution, and bonding. So an example would be like taking a staff meeting that's typically indoors, bringing it outdoors, or doing a shared activity with natural elements. So like here on down below, this is a tea leaf making lei activity I did with clients. And, you know, it's, yeah, and even just in ceremony and things, bringing in natural elements. I promise you there's something to it. And this bottom one, bringing the outdoors indoors. If for whatever reason you don't feel like you can be outdoors all the time, which is true in like hospital settings and whatever it is, but there's ways to bring natural elements indoors. So an example is the picture on the top. This is, I call it a mini peace garden. So I do these succulent gardens with people who maybe they can't get outside and have their own garden, but they can put this on their desk and give them a little piece. So yeah, and then I have PDFs that's pretty much it. I have PDFs that I've attached with these two activities, sort of therapeutic horticulture activities, making mandalas. This is one. And then this is a worksheet that is good. Both of these activities are great for all ages. So you can see the attachment for more information on that. Here's some resources. You'll get the slides too, so you could look up these books. Highly recommend them, especially the Forest Bathing and Biophilia Effect book. And yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity and for being here. And I've really enjoyed sharing this, this passion of mine. So I hope it does help you in some way.
Thank you so much, Aliza. That was wonderful. I am very glad to have heard everything you said. Just to let everyone know, I did put a link for our survey into the chat box. It would be great if you could please click into that and give us your feedback. And we have about 2 more minutes before we're supposed to end. So I'm just wondering if there's anyone who has any questions or comments they'd like to share in response to Aliza's presentation. And we will also, just so you know, I will be emailing out both those activities as well as the slides along with the link to this today's presentation. So those will be coming. Any questions, if you could just raise your hand or put something in the chat box. We're definitely have some nice compliments going on over here. Thank you. Mahalo from Colorado. Beautiful, enlightening. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Raju, please.
Sure, thank you so much. Eliza, question. I was wondering how the indigenous groups that live in the rainforest, how they may be able to help with conflict resolution skills by creating space for other communities to come there.
Yeah, that's interesting. They're doing it. I mean, they're resolving conflicts and they've done it. I guess it's just a matter of, there's always the, you know, bringing outsiders in is always a question, and whether that makes sense, whether like, you know, people who are totally separated from the culture come in and do these cultural practices, that's a question. But yeah, I think there's definitely a piece of that that would be helpful if those groups were willing to share. And but yeah, cultural sensitivity and appropriation, I think, is important, like, you know, but with that said, maybe there's some more common practices that, or some practices that are less like rooted in culture necessarily, that could be more applicable to everybody. Does that help? I thank you for bringing that point up. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you so much. So we're at time. It's 1 o'clock. I did put the survey in a couple times. If you don't mind to just click into that link, and it's just a few short questions. It really helps us know how you feel, what other kind of talks you would like. We will share the results with Aliza, so she gets to get some responses to what you thought she did that was effective and what you might like to see next time. So thank you all for being with us here. We hope you will join us next month, August 19th, for Elizabeth Kent, Signature Moves, what works for you in conflict resolution, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Go out into nature today. Bye. Thank you, Eliza.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.